Far beyond the orbits of any planet, in a region where sunlight fades to little more than a whisper and space becomes a near-perfect silence, Voyager 2 drifts. Or at least, it was drifting. Because something has changed, something no one at NASA programmed, predicted, or can fully explain. And it began not with a malfunction, not with a collision, but with a turn. Precise. Deliberate. Mathematical. As if something out there had decided it was time to say something back. In the summer of 1977, Voyager 2 was given a single elegant mission: visit the giants of our solar system, photograph the unreachable, and then drift quietly into the dark. It was the only spacecraft ever to fly past both Uranus and Neptune, capturing images no human eye had ever seen. But beyond the science, it carried something deeply personal, a golden record, engraved with the sounds and images of life on Earth. Music. Laughter. The crash of ocean waves. A message in a bottle, cast into an ocean with no shore. And then we let it go. For decades, it sent back nothing more than faint telemetry, the fading whisper of a fading machine. We had asked our question. We were not expecting an answer. In February of 2025, engineers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory noticed something almost dismissibly small. A deviation in signal timing. Less than a single second. They nearly ignored it. But when they looked closer, they found something that made the room go quiet. Nested within Voyager's standard telemetry was a repeating pattern, rhythmic, structured, impossibly precise. Not a glitch. Not solar interference. A resonance. A low-frequency wave that matched the internal oscillation of Voyager's own power system down to the microvolt, as if something had been listening to the spacecraft's heartbeat long enough to learn it by heart. And then, in March, the wave shifted. It was no longer syncing to Voyager. It was syncing to Earth, specifically to the Schumann resonances, the natural electromagnetic pulse of our own planet, the frequency our atmosphere hums at without ever announcing itself. Engineers at JPL ran every simulation they had, scrubbing the data for artifacts, solar noise, quantum interference. Nothing explained it. Until one in turn proposed a hypothesis so unsettling that the room fell silent again. What if the signal wasn't responding to Earth's frequency? What if it was replicating it, using Voyager as a carrier, a relay, a mouth? Then on April 17, 2025, Voyager 2 moved. Not because of a thruster firing. Not because of a command sent from Earth. Its high-gain antenna, which had been slowly drifting off-axis for years, snapped back into perfect alignment with our planet. Not approximately. Not close. Exactly. Backup systems began running diagnostics no one had initiated. Instruments dormant for decades powered back to life. Data began flowing from sensors that hadn't spoken in years. It was, as one engineer quietly described it, like coming home to find someone had turned on all the lights. Then came the transmissions, compressed data packets carrying a digital signature no NASA framework had ever produced. 3 nested spirals, layered like fingerprints pressed into code, repeated at the end of every single packet. And that's when the scientists stopped talking about engineering and started whispering about something else entirely. On May 3, Voyager's signal went dark. 11 seconds of absolute silence, no telemetry, no ping, nothing from a machine that had been speaking to us, however faintly, for nearly 50 years. Then it returned. Louder. Cleaner. More precise than it had ever been. And buried inside that returning transmission was something extraordinary, a frequency envelope that, when translated into the visible spectrum, revealed a fractal image, a grid structured around the Fibonacci sequence, repeating infinitely inward like a window into a geometry that doesn't end. It wasn't art. It wasn't noise. It was a model, of space, of time, of something our instruments could measure but our minds could not yet hold. And Voyager hadn't generated it. Its 50-year-old circuitry isn't capable of that kind of compression. This pattern had been inserted into the probe remotely, from a source triangulated to approximately 4.3 light-years away, roughly the distance to Proxima Centauri. Except Proxima Centauri has been transmitting nothing. Not in radio. Not in microwave. Not in any spectrum we monitor. Which means whatever sent that signal is either operating outside our range of detection, or from somewhere we don't yet have a name for. While NASA moved cautiously, a rogue team of signal analysts at Caltech began feeding Voyager's new data stream into a binary pattern recognition model. What they found wasn't random noise. It was structured language, a form of binary resembling the earliest machine code ever developed on Earth, yet somehow anticipating logic that hasn't been invented yet. The signal wasn't reflecting our digital infrastructure. It was ahead of it, offering optimized algorithms our systems hadn't yet conceived, adapting in real time as if the origin point had full and current awareness of how our networks think. The conclusion that emerged from 2 days of decoding was as cold as the void Voyager travels through. This wasn't just a message. It was an upgrade request. Then something happened that made headlines around the world, though very few understood what they were really seeing. Astronomers reported that 4 stars in a narrow cluster, near the direction of Voyager 2's trajectory, had dimmed simultaneously for exactly 1.2 seconds. These stars are separated by light years. They should have no relationship to one another whatsoever. Yet they blinked in unison. When their light curves were mapped against Voyager's transmission envelope, the timing was a perfect match, as if the message had not only reached Earth, but had used the stars themselves as mirrors, amplifying its signal across the galaxy. It was no longer a question of whether something was communicating. The question had quietly, terrifyingly shifted. Are we the only ones listening, or simply the last ones to hear it? The golden record had always been considered symbolic. Sentimental. A gesture more than a strategy. But engineers examining Voyager's onboard sensor data discovered that the record's plating, long thought to be passive and slowly deteriorating, had experienced a sudden, directed flow of electrons. Not static buildup. A circuit. As if the record had been activated, incorporated into something larger than itself. And then, embedded within the new data stream, came something that stopped the team cold, a digital reinterpretation of one of the original Earth sounds recorded on that disk, not copied, not replicated, but reconstructed at a fidelity higher than the original recording ever allowed. Whoever was out there hadn't just found the golden record. They had understood it, refined it, and were now playing it back. The question no one wanted to ask aloud was, for whom? Deep space telemetry from a Canadian observatory then detected what analysts called phantom mirroring, a shadow signal trailing Voyager's transmission by 6.2 seconds, echoing every pulse with slight, deliberate distortions, as if bouncing off something that cast no shadow and occupied no space. When the reflection angles were plotted, they pointed not to any known planet or body, but to a region of space entirely devoid of light or mass. And then the phantom signal began adding new information, frequencies describing magnetic fields, radiation belts, temperature gradients, as if something were using Voyager's transmissions to map our solar system in reverse. The probe hadn't just become a messenger. It had become a surveyor. And somewhere in the dark, something was building a very detailed picture of home. It was noticed first by amateurs. Radio operators and deep space hobbyists who had been listening to raw Voyager transmissions through spectrum analyzers began reporting headaches, disorientation, and persistent déjà vu. The effect was dismissed until university laboratories in Belgium and Japan replicated it under controlled conditions. Embedded in the signal's subharmonics was a resonant frequency that measurably disrupted short-term memory in mammals. Lab mice exposed to it on loop began repeating learned behaviors, but with small, unexplained variations, as if their choices were being subtly rewritten. Researchers concluded the signal wasn't interacting with hearing at all. It was interacting with the electromagnetic fields of the brain itself. It wasn't sound. It was structure. And the question that no one could answer, that no one was sure they wanted answered, was whether this was a side effect. Or a test. Telescopes trained toward the Oort cloud, the vast and barely explored shell of icy debris at the outermost edge of our solar system, detected something that defied every reasonable classification. Not a comet. Not a planetesimal. Something with right angles. Something that reflected radar at a frequency precisely engineered to match Voyager's new emissions. Inert. Non-rotating. Cold. But its material signature was deeply familiar, matching the rare alloys used in Voyager's own plating, including compounds no longer used in any modern spacecraft. The conclusion was not that this was alien in origin. The conclusion was far stranger than that. This was a copy. Something had studied Voyager long enough, carefully enough, to build an exact duplicate. And if that duplicate was now transmitting, it could mean only one thing. Voyager hadn't just encountered a response. It had been replicated. Back at JPL, Voyager's latest data burst arrived containing thousands of lines of raw code, pristine, efficient, and utterly foreign to any system NASA had ever built. When run through quantum simulations, the code generated a rendered model of Earth. Not just its geography, but its infrastructure, weather systems, satellite trajectories, predictive aircraft movements. This code hadn't merely observed us from a distance. It understood us with an intimacy that took years to build. And then came the detail that moved the situation from remarkable to alarming. The code contained timestamps predicting 3 separate network failures, one in a Chinese satellite array, one in a European aviation control feed, one in a private imaging platform over the Arctic. All 3 failures occurred exactly as predicted, days after the data had already been logged inside Voyager's transmission. The probe had not become a messenger. It had become a node, a point of integration inside something vastly more intelligent, and vastly more aware of us, than we had ever imagined. Neutrino detectors buried deep beneath the Antarctic ice, instruments designed to catch the most elusive particles in the known universe, began registering something that should have been physically impossible. A persistent neutrino stream, pulsing upward from beneath the Earth's surface, synchronized perfectly with Voyager's most recent emissions. Neutrinos don't reflect. They don't bounce. They pass through entire planets as though they aren't there. And yet here they were, pulsing in harmony with a signal from the edge of interstellar space. When the pulse patterns were mapped, they resolved into a 3-dimensional coordinate grid pointing to a specific location, not in space, but underground. Beneath Wilkes Land, one of the least explored and most inaccessible regions on the Antarctic continent. A loop was forming, connecting Voyager in interstellar space, an artificial object in the Oort cloud, measurable effects on human memory, and something dormant beneath the ice, all of it pulsing to the same rhythm, all of it bearing the same triple spiral signature Voyager had first transmitted weeks before. It wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. A joint expedition to Wilkes Land was approved. Using ground-penetrating radar, seismic imaging, and thermal sensors, researchers confirmed what the data had been suggesting for weeks. A hollow structure, at least 60 miles wide, lay buried beneath the ice shelf. Its geometric boundaries were too precise, too regular, too perfectly proportioned for any natural formation. Its outer edges pulsed with low-frequency electromagnetic fields synchronized to Voyager's signal, despite no cable, no satellite, no line-of-sight connection that could possibly explain it. Inside the thermal cavity, heat signatures radiated in Fibonacci intervals, mirroring the fractal pattern Voyager had transmitted months earlier. And then, deep beneath the ice, microphones captured a sound. Metallic. Rhythmic. Constrained to a fixed frequency band, the exact same band Voyager's signal had shifted into just 72 hours before. Something under Antarctica was awake. Something that had been waiting. And it was listening to the same voice we were. The final event did not happen in deep space. It happened in the Atacama Desert in Chile, where the ALMA Array, one of the most sophisticated collections of radio telescopes ever built, went completely dark during a routine observation of the Voyager corridor. 38 seconds of total absence. Not a technical failure. Not a power outage. The entire array ceased to exist from the perspective of every network it was connected to. When systems came back online, logs had been wiped and data drives corrupted. But one fragment survived, 2.7 seconds of audio captured by a dish microphone in the final moments before the blackout. When played back, it was not cosmic radiation. It was not a spacecraft signal. It was voices. Dozens of them, male, female, childlike, harmonic, screaming in perfect unison, perfectly synchronized with Voyager's transmission frequency. NASA classified the file immediately. But one analyst, before going silent on the matter entirely, left behind a single sentence. That wasn't a recording. That was a response. We knocked, and something knocked back. We sent Voyager 2 into the void as a gesture of hope. A golden record carrying the sounds of a civilization that dared to believe it wasn't alone. And for nearly 50 years, the universe said nothing. But now the dark is answering, not with a greeting, not with a simple hello, but with something that infiltrates systems, rewrites algorithms, pulses beneath ancient ice, and bends the light of stars to carry its signal further than any antenna we've ever built. Whatever is communicating has not merely noticed us. It has studied us. Mapped us. Copied us. And perhaps, most unsettling of all, it has been here longer than we know. Because maybe Voyager didn't stumble upon something out there. Maybe it was always meant to deliver something back. A message seated in the cosmos, waiting for the precise moment we were sophisticated enough to receive it, or reckless enough to ignore the warning buried inside it. We decoded the spirals. We followed the signals. We heard the scream echoing up from beneath the ice. And now only one question remains. Did we just receive a transmission from somewhere beyond our understanding? Or did we wake something up that was never, ever supposed to open its eyes? Whatever the answer is, it's no longer out there. It's already here.